All right. So, hi, everyone. I'm Victoria, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at August Schools. First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is such an important discussion, and I'm so honored to bring together such an amazing group of women here for our panel. They are such experts and truly so thoughtful about how they support the young women in their communities. So I'm so excited for you all to get to hear a little bit more from them today. So a couple months back for our company on site, the August Schools team read the book, The Anxious Generation, which I'm sure many of you have also read. And it was so heartbreaking to see these statistics on the mental health of young people. And it's something you know anecdotally, but to see those numbers is really shocking, especially the statistics about young women. And I know this is something that, every school is thinking about right now. And so we wanted to bring together practitioners who are working with girls every day to talk a bit more about what they're doing, hear some best practices, and talk a bit more about what we can all be doing to support young women. So we have so much to learn from each other. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you all for introductions.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, at least here on the East Coast where I am. It is afternoon. I'm Dr. Holly Hinderly. I'm a counseling psychologist and the school psychologist at Holton Arms School, which is a school 3rd grade through 12th grade, founded for girls. And I am primarily in our upper school where we have about 370 students. And this is my 3rd independent school, but my first school for girls. And I'm also in private practice where I see teens and young adults.
I'm Jamie Yuva. I am the Director of Student and Family Support at the Spence School in New York City. We're an all-girls school, K through 12, and we have a little over 750 students. And my role at Spence is to oversee various departments. So learning resource department, counseling department, and like health and wellness nursing in an attempt to really integrate student support systems, increase collaboration, and really work on building a cohesive K through 12 experience for students and families.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marisa Crandall. I am in Los Angeles. I am a former psychologist and school psychologist. My PhD is in clinical and developmental and school psychology. For over 20 years, I led student support and provided student support to kids in independent schools, first at a boys' school in Philadelphia, which then merged with a girls' school, and then most recently at the Marlborough School out here in Los Angeles. I'm now working privately in practice as a coach for, I see primarily high school students, young adults, and parents.
Wonderful. So to kick things off, I'll start with my first question. So we're here to talk about how we can support young women. So what do you think are some of the unique challenges that young women face in balancing their academic, social, and emotional well-being?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in. I was just teaching a health class this morning. We call it seminar for our 9th graders. And we were talking about mental health and specifically sort of body image and whatnot. And social media, came up, and they hate to hear us say as adults that social media and technology is an issue. But when you ask them, they are willing to admit, that it's distracting, it's time consuming, it can take you on a emotional roller coaster. And what's being posted or friended or liked or what have you can have real implications to how they're feeling and their anxiety. So I would say social media is a big thing.
Absolutely.
I agree. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I agree. I was recently reading some research about this girls in particular self-reporting, feeling worse about themselves after viewing others' social media. And it's, survey data from high achieving schools across the country. And there is a real, while many children feel that, for girls in particular, the norms on that is significantly higher in terms of their feelings of self-worth, feelings of envy, thinking other people's lives are better than their own. So I think that's a huge, huge factor.
I agree. We saw the same thing with high achieving schools comparisons. Part of what I also see affects girls is, obviously in our culture, girls have particular roles assigned to them, which include being pretty, beautiful, thin, smart but not too smart, nice, but also popular and cool, which is not correlated with niceness usually. And what I've also seen a lot of is it's the social media, it's the Dr. TikTok effect is what I see, which is sort of, they're getting sort of snippets of information, some of which is accurate, some of which is not accurate, but because they're in their own self, they are now self-diagnosing. They're now spending a lot of time in, looking at other people who have self-diagnosed with a particular kind of thing, and they're not necessarily connecting with people in the real world who can diagnose more appropriately or perhaps help them develop coping skills around the things that are bothering them. The other big thing that I see for kids today is that our culture has decided somehow that mental health means you're happy all the time or you're comfortable all the time, right? And that's a damaging view, not just because it's wrong and all we need the full range of emotions in order to be emotionally healthy, mentally healthy, but also because it means that kids then, when they feel uncomfortable, scared, worried, anxious, they say, oh, I need to avoid this thing to protect my mental health, which actually is the very worst thing for their mental health.
Right. I want to piggyback on something you said, Marisa, about the niceness. And I find that when I'm talking to kids about the dilemmas that they're having, and to girls in particular, that it's I want to please in my relationships. So
Yes.
I want to please my parents in getting the grades that they want me to have. I want to please my coaches to make sure that they're happy with my performance. I want to please my friends. And oftentimes those things are in direct conflict, right? I can't go to the party on Friday night and study for the test that I need to get an A on and be at the meet, as well. And so who am I going to say no to, or who am I going to disappoint becomes really, really hard. And I think it takes a toll on girls. I don't want to say more so than boys, but certainly I see the strain in terms of how do I make everyone happy, and then how can I communicate that I've got to let somebody down or that I can't do everything at once. And I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that also then adds to like this overscheduling that happens to girls, where they or kids who are taking on that sort of people-pleasing role in all these different ways, that we've seen then kids get overscheduled and burn out. They don't have time for rest. They don't have time to decompress. And our highest achievers in all of those areas at some time usually kind of crack a little bit. And, I just think about us in schools and as adults providing guidance for young women that, it's important for us to keep an eye on that and, talk to the kids we're caring for directly when we see them sort of heading down that path.
For sure.
Yeah, and that leads me into my next question. So as practitioners, caring for these students, what resources or programming have you found most effective in supporting these young women?
Hmm.
I think to start, like robust clinical support in schools is
Yes.
hugely important. You know, counselors, clinicians at the large, you know, at our large schools. I mean, they're small, but there's a lot of kids to take care of. If there's not enough mental health support in the school, then really that becomes a crisis management job, and not not, and there's not enough room to build like the healthy habits. So that's, I mean, the number one thing. And then the second thing for me is this idea of collaboration. Working in silos in terms of support just isn't really all that productive. And it's almost like you're kind of playing whack-a-mole, because as we know, a lot of like the mental health issues also, you know, are intersecting with learning issues or, you know, other health issues. So, you know, collaboration in the school setting, I think, is huge.
100%. Go
ahead, Marisa.
Thank you, Holly. 100%, Jamie, I agree with you on both of those things. One of the things that especially middle schoolers and upper schoolers really desperately want is to have conversations about the things that are meaningful to them and the things that are hard for them. And they don't want to be lectured about it, but what they need and what they really benefit from is relationships with trusted adults who are trained at providing safer containers for having these conversations. So that's school counselors, school psychologists, but it's also sort of the SEL programming, the health and wellness programming in the school, providing really excellent educators who know how to, like, you know, as I said, provide a safe container for kids to engage in conversations that are about things that are really important to them. So to provide them with the education they need, but also to provide them with the time that they need to connect with each other, be there for each other, learn from each other, and just express what they need to express. And then Jamie's other point is absolutely 100%, which is that we have to, all of these efforts have to be integrated and intentional in order for them to be comprehensive. When they're siloed, as Jamie said, we're actually not serving the kids very well. Most kids who are struggling academically are having some kind of emotional issue as well. They go, how could they not, right? School is so important to these kids. If they're not doing well, they're struggling, they're suffering from that, right? Or if, you know, we've had kids like with diabetes or something, like their teachers need to know how to support them. And the kids need to be able to know that they can rely on the adults to know what they need to know at the same time that we're protecting their privacy. So it's very, very complex, and it's really important to have that integrated, I believe, model of supporting the whole person.
I want to echo that because when I first came to my school, I was the only, we had one counselor in each division. This year, we finally have two in the upper school, which is our largest division. And I'm so happy to have a colleague. As you said, Jamie, I think the numbers matter. But because I was the only professional, I really deputized the faculty and staff I'm not going to be everyone's trusted adult. You know, I'm only one person, and I might not be everyone's cup of tea, and I can't be everywhere at once. So I think really having that training for your faculty, having an advisory program, Marisa, I want to add that to the others that you mentioned, is important in terms of, you know, here's how you listen to kids, here's how you create that container, and then being really clear about when it is time to make that referral to the counseling office, right? And having that partnership. I rely on that partnership with the faculty, and I appreciate how much they trust me and are willing to come to me and include me in concerns that they have, but also that they're willing to step into it and to have some of the tougher conversations, because sometimes the kids, they love their English teacher, they love their math teacher, and that's the person that they want to start this conversation with about what's going on with them. So that's helpful. I should mention, and this is not to be a commercial, but I I am on the faculty of the Stanley King Institute, where we teach, we have summer institutes and go from school to school and really train teachers in how to feel comfortable setting those containers and being available for students and listening.
Holly,
I love that you added that. Holly. That's so important. At Marlboro, I spent so much time, and the school committed a lot of time to training teachers. We did actually have Stanley King come. Like, it's very important, and part of it is helping the teachers recognize, just as you said, sort of what's problematic and what's normal but uncomfortable. Right. When I first got there, sometimes people were like, well, she's crying, she needs to come see you. And I was like, an 8th grader crying is not a clinical emergency. Right. And in fact, let's decriminalize the idea of crying. Let's understand that emotional expression is normal, and let's teach all the adults in the building. When we did restorative practices training, we made sure every person in the building was trained. Right.
Yeah.
So that you're increasing, just what you said, who knows who's going to be this person's trusted adult. I don't care who it is. I just want to make sure that each kid has someone in the building that they can trust.
Right. I want to mention to answer your question, Victoria, a couple of other programs that I've seen successful. When I came to my school the year before, students had developed a mental health day conference for themselves. So it was by students, for students. And it really was around breaking this idea of stigma, that we can't talk about this, that this topic has to be in the shadows. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to help with that program and keep it going over the 4 years that I've been at the school. And I think it's really effective because the students, they have the beat, right? They know the pulse. They know how to say it so that people can hear it. And the way I might say it as a psychologist might be a little too formal or clinical. And so I really enjoyed, and I see that the impact of this program in helping our students normalize this is a conversation that we can have. My colleague and I are actually starting something tomorrow called Cookie Chat. And we've decided to invite some faculty to talk about how they manage their wellness and well-being, how they take care of themselves, self-care and balance and whatnot. And so we're going to serve cookies and get in the Harkness room and hear from some of our teachers that are very well, respected and revered, but have them talk about how they manage their mental health, relationships, well-being, et cetera, and particularly in the doldrums of the winter, and again, hopefully normalizing that conversation.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, like you said, different students have different adults that they trust in school. And I remember people always went to the English teacher for that sort of thing. So the collaboration piece is something that we definitely talk a lot about at August Schools. How are we ensuring that we're preserving that privacy and confidentiality, but also making sure that there's communication across teams, that, for the child that goes to the nurse every day with a stomach ache, that they're the counselor because anxiety thing. So that's awesome. And so my next question is sort of, the collaboration is amazing, but it's really hard to execute on that. So how do you all sort of ensure that there is that collaboration between administration, teachers, counselors, learning specialists, everyone in the school?
I think you have to have regular systems in place. And I feel fortunate that we in my school have a number of, we have a dean's meeting every week where everyone from the learning specialist to the counselor to the dean for each grade level and the administrators, the college counselors are there to talk about, students that may be struggling, or individually, or larger student issues like, this group of students isn't getting along or what have you. I think that's really helpful. During the pandemic, we came up with something, a Google form called Student of Concern. Part of it was because we all weren't in the building together. So if a adult had a concern about a student, they could, kind of get that information out there, and it would come to counselors, learning specialists, and grade deans. And then we can follow up and loop around and figure out, okay, what needs to be done, and who's on first, to make sure that this issue gets addressed. So those are just two of the ways that I think, to have different touch points where people can communicate.
Yeah. And I think those teams, I think the teams and structures, Holly, that you mentioned, of having those ongoing is huge. And one thing I'm finding over time is that we also need to think about developmentally how those teams might work in lower school, middle school, upper school. So for example, the division head of our lower school is so connected with the parent community because she's outside every single day for pickup and drop off. So she's going to take the lead on some conversations that perhaps I or the counselor or the learning specialist would have in middle or upper school. So thinking about who the players are, what leveraging the relationships that they already have, and using that sort of like developmental schooling perspective to create some of those structures.
I agree with everything. It's funny, Holly, we came up with the same students of concern kind of referral form. I think that it also, though, starts with having someone at the top senior leadership level who understands this work and understands the importance of it, because what I think can be a barrier sometimes is people who are very great at their jobs in these kind of roles who have a lot of responsibility and not a ton of authority. And that can be very frustrating and very hard and time consuming and doesn't, and ends up the care doesn't trickle down to the kids in the way that it needs to.
Right.
So, not siloing people and departments, having regular meetings, making sure that that all the important players are in the room. We used to have, so in addition to, sort of defining rules clearly, the title dean means something different in every school. Yeah. Some deans are very focused on, discipline. Some deans are more focused on student life. Some it's both. We just don't know. So whatever the particular roles are like in each school, having clear definition of those roles, and then making sure that the right people are in the room. When we would do upper school, student support meetings, we always had our diversity, equity, and inclusion person there, because we need to make sure that that's included in the room, because for so many kids, identity is part of what is happening for them in their day. So yeah, it depends on the structures within each school. But in my opinion, it's very important for someone to be leading this work who has access to the very highest levels of decision making.
I agree.
That's awesome. Yeah, just having a representative in leadership who can advocate for students. So in that vein, oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
Can I just address what was put in the chat about being a horrible role model for managing mental health? Because I just want to speak to that and say that what we're looking for is not the gold standard models of mental health for our cookie chats. What we're looking for is for teachers to really share where they fall down, where they try to get back up, what's a struggle for them, how they've, muddled through things. So I want to dispel the idea that we're like lifting up, sort of these amazing models of mental health. Of course, as educators, we have our own struggles for trying to maintain balance and wellness and all of that. And I actually am hoping that, and I've talked explicitly with the faculty that are going to be doing this, I want them to be a little vulnerable. I'm not saying spill all your business, but I want them to kind of show kids that even as adults, we are still endeavoring and trying to manage our mental health. And that it's okay to talk about that and not have it perfect. So thank you, Eric, for putting that out there.
And Holly, thank you so much for that. That's, I think, is huge. I mean, part of thinking back to the first question and what issues do we see around mental health, For the girls that we support, I think another trend is that there still remains a stigma around mental health struggles. And what you just said, Holly, just like resonated so much, because it not only speaks to teaching kids strategies and things like that, but also destigmatizing that, that having mental health or struggling with that balance is normal. It's normalizing it, it's destigmatizing it. And it gets back to Maurice's point earlier of mental health is not always being happy. It's not always being perfectly balanced, right? So that's what I love the cookie chat. Sounds great.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think it's so important for adults to model for children that we have inner lives and that we have inner struggles, right? Because one of the things that we find kids, certainly well through adolescence, is they compare their inner experience to other people's outer experience. This is one of the reasons why social media is so damaging to them, is because they look at all these very curated pictures and they think, well, I don't feel that way. This person is doing so much better than me. And that feeds this perfectionism and just sort of self-recrimination and all this stuff. So it's really important, I think, for adults in a healthy, boundaried way to model that, yeah, I'm feeling frustrated right now, or I'm feeling anxious about this, and here's how I'm handling it, right? Because otherwise the kids walk around feeling like they're the only person who has these struggles or who feels this way, and everybody else is just, having unicorns and rainbows all day. And that's not helpful for them. That makes them feel worse.
Exactly.
Yeah. And those moments of vulnerability, that's when the connection happens of like, oh, me too. I struggle with that too. So I love that you wanted to address that. So thank you. And sort of in that vein of it sort of takes a village and modeling those behaviors, what role do families play in this work, and how do you engage them as sort of partners in supporting their child?
As much as we can engage them, right? But the thing that I always say to parents, I start with, is like the task of sort of child development, certainly adolescence, is to develop self-regulation. And when you're the parent of an adolescent, especially, or a little kid, you also have to work on your own self-regulation, right? As parents, we get we're biologically wired that when our child is upset, we get activated, right? So as an educator, I think there's also a big responsibility to educate the parents about developmental, trajectories, what kids need, how they perceive things, but also just, again, sort of the importance of providing that safe container at home as well, right? Kids need to be able to express themselves and to have their emotions and to know that their parent can handle it and is not going to freak out or themselves get dysregulated, right? So to me, it starts with really good sort of school-home partnership around some psychoeducation, around social emotional learning for kids, and really getting parent buy-in on the social emotional learning and culture of the school.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes in terms of educating parents, I've found it helpful to sometimes point to other experts and not necessarily make it coming from the school, because, at times there may be fear and mistrust on the family's part of, is the school trying to counsel my child out? Like, what's going on here? So sometimes we'll bring in outside experts, or I'll have books on my shelf that I can point to and say, this might be a helpful text for you to take a look at. I also think it's like our responsibility in schools to be as honest and straightforward as we can be. I think we do our kids a real disservice when we dance around our concerns and use euphemisms for things that are really serious. If there's a suicide risk, like, name it. and be direct, because it's the only way that we can get kids to get the support they need from their families as well.
I think that partnering with parents, I see as a primary part of my job, and letting them know that this is not an us them, it's not you against the school. We want to partner with you. We want to be a resource. We're all coming around this child to play the roles that we're meant to play and to support them. And I understand that sometimes families are not quite sure if they can trust, or maybe something, sometimes I'm hearing about something that happened in, years ago at the school or whatnot. And so how to repair, but also communicate, this is a fresh start. Let's try to have a fresh conversation here. Maybe the school has let you down in the past, but let's try to container that off, to use your word, Marisa, and try to create a container of good that we can support where your child is now. I think one of the things that I want our parents to understand, and particularly parents of juniors and seniors, is that when the specter of college comes in to play, I think particularly girls begin to go back to that pleasing thing. I have had girls say, the college I get into has to be worth what my parents have paid for my education since third grade. I need to pay back. I need to justify, and I'm going, oh my gosh, that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, how are you going to do that? Students want their parents to be proud of them. And so one of the things, it is heavy. And one of the things that I think I encourage parents to do is, as you said, Marisa, regulate elsewhere, not with your child. There may be frustration, anxiety, disappointment, whatever, but don't let that seep into your conversations with your child about where they're going next or going from here. And this is not a transaction. A child shouldn't feel like they have to pay back for the investment that you wanted to make in them. You wanted to give them the gift of this education. But how do we keep girls from feeling like, well, now I have to be perfect or get into the perfect university in order to please my parents? And I think sometimes those messages are not intentionally sent, but are, misinterpreted, I would like to say, by the students from what they're hearing from their parents.
Absolutely.
And I think parents are stressed about this too, right? It does cost a lot of money, and college costs a lot of money, and things feel scary, and feeling like I got my kid into, XY university feels like an accomplishment, feels like something you can show for it, right? And in a world where a lot of things feel out of control right now, this is something they feel they can control. Right. But you're absolutely right. Girls especially, I think, really do feel that pull to make everybody happy at their own expense.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it just makes your heart hurt for the juniors and seniors. So remember that.
And I would say what's interesting is that the heightened anxiety that happens, I mean, the way that Spence is designed is we have a building for grades 5 through 12. We have a separate building, we're not a campus school in New York City. And we have a separate building for K through 4. And around December, when the first rounds of applications for colleges are going out, that sense of anxiety trickles down. I mean, all the way to our kids who start getting grades in seventh grade. And that pressure is real. It seems to only be increasing. And it's really the whole school community that's impacted a lot of the time.
Wow.
Oh, so in sort of looking ahead, so based on this, what changes or improvements would you like to see in how schools support young women in the next couple years.
You know, my dream is that we continue to highlight this conversation about mental health and well-being. And I really would love to see more integration of conversations and practices around, you know, grounding, meditations, you know, taking a mindful moment, whatever it is, in the academic space. I have worked with teachers at different schools that, you know, that's their thing, that's their interest, you know, they do yoga outside of school or whatever. And so they bring that into their work. And I think they are seeing that pay such dividends. And I wish that we could have more of that, you know, that there would be more opportunities for mindful moments. Or I know there's a girls' school in the DMV where a teacher I heard years ago is doing like these power stances. And so everyone would get up and do power stance, you know, before they took a test or started class or what have you. And it doesn't take a lot, and it doesn't necessarily have to take away from the curriculum and, you know, getting done what you need to get done. But I think just those few moments can really make a difference. So that's one thing that I can think of.
I love that. I love the power stance. We should all do that before any big meeting. Important thing.
I think something really important is sort of what Holly started speaking about earlier, which is making sure that everybody in the building understands the value of connection and of including this kind of work in their work with students, right? Like a teacher is not a math teacher. A teacher is teaching a child, right? Yeah. And part of that child is not just the math, right? And I have found, you know, educators are so passionate. So it's really important for them to understand the why. So if I'm saying, I want you to spend 5 minutes checking in and see how everybody is, because time is like the most valuable resource in school. If I'm going to ask them to spend some time doing something, I want them to understand. So I think it's a really valuable investment in having all of the people, faculty and the staff in the school, understand the importance, understand, you know, what a good working definition of mental health is. What are some strategies that are useful in your daily life, and what are some practices that are useful in moments of crisis or, you know, sub-crisis. I think that we as adults need to listen more and talk less. In general, we tend to overtalk when we're dealing with kids.
Yep.
And kids have wisdom, and they actually have a lot to say. And like I said, if they feel that there is a legitimate request to hear what they have to say, they will tell you. They will tell you. And I think it's important for the adults in the building to be hearing what the kids are saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like you just answered the question in the chat so beautifully about how educators can really be authentic and how they support. Yeah. I was, as you were saying, I was like, that's the you're answering the question. So yeah, I think that listening piece is huge, and children are so wise. They are very, very wise, and they have so much to teach us. So yeah, but if anybody else has anything to answer that question about authenticity, and it sort of reminds me of what you're saying, Holly, about the cookie chats of just sort of bringing your authentic self, and that's what will really resonate and connect with students. Right.
I think we also have to, until children will tell you what they need and what's important to them. And I want to talk a little bit about identity, which I think is a big topic right now in girls' schools, and particularly gender identity, but also other marginalized identities. And I think that as school, we have to keep growing our capacity to meet the children where they are and believe who they say they are.
Yes.
And what they need. And so some of my work in schools in my role has been around how do I help children not just say to me how they feel. And again, right now I'm talking about kids with marginalized identities, but it could be everybody. But how do they get that voice or make that space or be their authentic self in the community, right? And sometimes that feels a little riskier, and a little scary, particularly if I'm just, kind of learning about myself, right now, or maybe some hurtful things have happened, some microaggressions around my identity. But I think as schools, we're going to need to figure out how we're going to continue to make space for students with marginalized identities.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I love this conversation, and I'm so happy we could sort of bring everyone together to talk about these things, especially things that I know are on people's minds, things that people want to talk more about. So I know we're sort of getting close to the end of our time. We could talk about this all day, but I wanted to end with one last question. Sort of, what's one piece of advice you'd give to those listening today for how they can support young women? And not necessarily in the school, it can be anything. The young women in our lives that we interact with. So, just wanted to end on that last note.
I think my piece of advice would be to help young women trust their own inner voice. And their own gut instincts. I think there are a lot of forces in our society that quiet girls' voices. And again, going back to that niceness that Dr. Marisa talked about, when we're prioritizing kindness and niceness, and I'm not at all saying that people should just be mean and ugly, but when that is a gender expectation, then that, I think, makes it easier, or makes a girl feel that, well, I need to quiet myself. I need to put others' comfort first. I need to not trust my instinct that there's something about the situation that maybe doesn't feel right, or maybe upsets me, or that's not how I think about this. So I see voice as a primary concern with for girls right now, and I think that giving them the confidence and the capacity to express their authentic point of view is really what we need to be attentive to in the coming years, amongst other things. But that's the one that came to mind.
Yes, the idea of one piece of advice is
Yes, there's so many.
Following some of the themes that we sort of talked about today, I think a piece of advice that I would give is think of creative ways to normalize imperfection. We need to be showing girls and young women that we don't need to be perfect in all of the time, and support them in understanding that we will all make mistakes. No journey is perfect, and we'll get through it, even when there are obstacles along the way.
I love both what Holly and Jamie said, and rather than reiterating, what I would say is part of be strategic in how you parse your energy and your time and your kindness and your love, right? Because I have worked with many teachers who sort of have told students, well, you should be giving 100% to every class, right? You should be giving 100% to everything you do, right? That's impossible. That's energetically way too expensive. And, similar sort of to what Holly was saying, we're told we're supposed to be nice to everybody. What if it harms me to be nice to you? What if it is not aligned with my values to do this particular thing that you're telling me I have to do, right? So
So my advice, I guess, would be really, it starts from sort of what I think Holly was saying, which is key into what are my values? What are my needs in this moment? What are my goals? Is this going to serve me in reaching those goals? And your consideration for yourself has to be just as important as your consideration for anybody else. And be strategic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. What a beautiful note to end on. So I know we went a little bit over, but I just want to thank everyone for attending and to answer a couple questions in the chat about there's not a certificate, but the registration can be if you need proof of attendance. And this session was recorded. So thank you everyone so much for attending. We really appreciate your time, and I hope you can continue having these conversations within your communities and within your schools. And yeah, big thank you to the panelists. Just want to give, a round of applause to them because they truly, this was such a valuable discussion. So, just like someone said in the chat, this was really amazing. So we want to really thank you for your time. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Victoria.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Holly,
Heather.
Lisa. It was a pleasure to be in the room.
Yeah.
One day.
Holly and Jamie, you are super impressive. I loved this.
Oh, this
Thank
was
you.
really fun.
Great
Thank
conversation.
you. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day, wonderful week.
Great, thank
Bye.
you. Bye.